Good evening. The time is now 6:35, April 5th, 2022. This is a call to order of the Teaching and Learning Committee. I'm Chair Christine Baptiste Perez. In attendance, we have Committee Member Joseph Sokolovic, Joseph Lombard, and Board Member Albert Benaham. The first item on our agenda is the approval of minutes for March 15, 2022.
Motion to approve the minutes for March 15th, 2022.
Second the motion.
All right, all in favor?
Motion approved.
Oh,
Aye.
No corrections, thank you.
any corrections?
No corrections.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it. So the minutes for March 5th were approved. We're going to move into the second item on our agenda. It's discussion and possible action on Discovery Magnet School field trip to Nature's Classroom. So, it's going to be Bruce.
We have Principal Ms. Sangeeta Bella and teacher Ms. Servino participating to present.
Good evening.
Hi. Just want to make sure you can hear me okay. All
All
right,
good,
so we have been attending Nature's Classroom for 11 years now with 6th grade students for 5 days. We haven't been going the past 2 days 2 years due to the pandemic. When we travel always inside of Connecticut. This year we're planning on going to Ivoryton if we get approved to do this trip. We're going to be leaving the day after Memorial Day and coming back that Friday. So this year, instead of a 5-day trip, it'll be a 4-day trip. The reason for this is just to offer a unique education experience to these students. So we have a lot of team building. We have classes that are held mostly outdoors. We have eat dinners together or all meals together. We participate in group events, and the kids get to select they get to choose some of their classes throughout the day. This year we have a little bit different because of COVID. We have specific protocols that are in place that are required from Nature's Classroom's perspective. So 72 hours before we leave, everyone is required to have a COVID test, and that test must show that it's negative. The day we leave the trip, it says that a rapid antigen test is required. And so assuming those are negative, so we all get to board on the bus and get on. All of the indoor activities will be mask on. Outdoor activities, the masks will be allowed to be removed. If there's any case where a participant is ill on the trip, rapid tests are given there. If they're tested positive, we just ask the parents, call the parents, ask them to come up and pick the child up as quickly as possible. I think that's about it.
Mrs. Bella is trying to speak, but we can't hear her, or at least I saw your mouth moving.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I was just saying that we have 44 students in our 6th grade classrooms, 5 chaperones that are going to be in attendance. And again, this is a trip that we have been doing every year for our 6th graders, and we look forward to going there because it's not that far, but it also gives them the opportunity to, again, as using teamwork and collaboration and just understanding, because as you know, Nature's Classroom, when you go there, there is no devices. So kids get to actually talk to each other and communicate, which is something, I think it's a big feat these days. For children to have a conversation without electronic devices. So we're hoping that we're asking the board to approve our overnight trip for 4 days to Nature's Classroom, starting on June 1st through June 4th.
May 31st to June 3rd.
Sorry, thank you.
No, you're good.
Are there any questions from the board? Ms. Kolovich?
Yes. As far as the first test before going, the first COVID test, does that have to be PCR? Or
It actually, I'm reading the Nature's Classroom COVID information, and it doesn't specify that it's PCR. So this is their words. They say all participants attending the trip will need to acquire a negative COVID-19 test 72 hours prior to arrival and a rapid antigen test on the day of departure.
Right. So seeing as that they differentiate, maybe that should be actually asked of them to make sure, because they differentiate for the rapid at the second part, but don't mention it on the first part.
Right.
So I'm leaning towards thinking maybe they mean the PCR, something that they can verify with a piece of paper rather than just a strip. I don't have a problem with it either way, but I just want to make sure that the kids could go and it's not like a last minute thing where we wanted a PCR and everybody took a rapid.
So we'll definitely clarify that.
Yeah, we will.
And
That's a
one
great
more
question.
question. Right. One more question. How far is the drive? How far is the drive to?
How far is drive? It's hour and.
Oh, it's just past Hammonasset. So by bus, it's 45 minutes up Route 95.
All right, that's fine. Thank you.
Mr. Lombard, any questions?
No, I have no questions, thank you.
I just want to say, we do have enough tests to hand out to all the sixth graders for the rapid, so there won't be a cost incurred. We kept some back just for cases like this.
Oh, great, thank you.
I have a question. Did we follow up if a child does have or somehow test positive for COVID at the end of the field trip and can't enter the bus? Do we have a procedure set where one of the chaperones are either going to wait back for a parent to pick them up, or what would happen in that scenario?
We have for, in the past, we've had to have kids picked up for illness. One child had ringworm, and the parent is pretty great about coming up and picking them up. We actually let them know in advance, before the trip. We just had a parent meeting a couple of weeks ago, and they kind of asked some of the same questions too. So they're on call if needed, and they agree to come up, but one of us would definitely wait. I always go on the bus, and we have the other teacher that goes. She drives separately so she can stay back for these cases.
Right. And are they asking for proof of vaccination, or just the test that we're going to get clarification?
They say that it's a recommendation that they have a test or they have a vaccination. They're not asking for proof of vaccination. They just ask that it's recommended. The only thing that they're asking proof of is whether they've got a test, a negative COVID test.
But Howard?
Yes, I have a question. Thank you. Question: when the kids come before they go to school, are they going to do the test again before going inside of school?
So it's pretty cool. The Nature's Classroom, we ask the kids just to come. Most of the kids still come to school on the bus with their bags and everything, and we just hold them in the cafeteria. I'm sure that we would do the rapid tests there. The parents usually. Oh, I'm asking because it's going to a place. We never know the place, how they look like and what's going on. So be sure the kids coming back, inside the classroom or the school, they can do the test to be sure they're negative. Because you can take that germ in the air, touching something, whatever. We can
definitely make sure that they have the test kits, additional test kits, so that we can provide it to the parents, and that way they can test the students before they come back to school.
Yes, please. Thank you so much. Thank you. No more questions.
I have a follow-up question to that. Before leaving, will either the principal, teachers, would anyone assist the student in actually taking the test to ensure that it's properly administered? Or that sounds like a nurse function, but just to make sure the test is actually done correctly? You can't really stick
Most
it up
of the
the wrong
time, the
nostril.
parents are there too, because they are always there to see off their children. So we'll make sure that, we'll do it in our cafeteria with the kids and the parents, so it's all done properly.
No, that's returning from the trip. There was, before you can get on the bus to come back, you have to take a rapid test. So how would testing occur to get back on the bus back to Bridgeport?
Oh, they didn't specify that they would have to take a rapid test on the way back. It was it was on the day of the first day of the trip before they board the bus, they need to take a rapid test.
Oh, okay. I was a little confused. I thought you had to test before you go and also test coming back.
No.
Oh.
Yeah.
But that was Mr. Banahan who wanted to make sure that the children are not sick. So we said we definitely will provide them with kits.
Yeah.
All right. Any additional questions? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the field trip.
This can be Magnus school field trip.
Sorry, I'll entertain a motion to approve Interdiscovery Magnet School field trip on May 31st, 2022 to June 3rd. For, I forget the name of the location, to Nature's Classroom.
Ivoryton.
Iverton, Connecticut, Nature's Classroom.
I'm like, so moved.
Second, is this going to the full board or is this just
Yeah.
right here?
Yes.
That's, okay.
Oh, wait,
Yeah.
that's okay, hold on.
Yes,
Then we
the
gotta
motion is not to approve.
Yeah, we got it. Motion to.
Motion to submit to the full, will anyone entertain an amendment to the motion to submit to the full board or withdraw the motion?
Withdraw the motion.
I'll second it. I'll make the amendment.
To submit to the full board, oh Lord. The field trip to Nature's Classroom, May 31st, 2022 to June 3rd, 2022 to the full board for approval.
So moved.
Second.
The motion on the table is, just to clarify, is to approve the field trip to go, the field trip to go to the full board for approval.
Correct.
So that, just wanted to clarify before we vote on it. Any further discussion? Seeing that there's no discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it. Nature's field trip will be, the field trip will be presented to the full board at the next board meeting. We're going to move to the next item on the agenda. Is discussion and possible, thank you. Are you on the second agenda? Is this-
No, they're all set.
You're all set.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
both. Have a good evening.
Bye.
Now we're going to move to the third item on the agenda. It's discussion and possible action on Winthrop School field trip to Washington, D.C. Oh, there you go.
Hi, how you doing? Where would you like to?
Well, you gotta come closer to the microphone.
Here, I'll have you sit here. I can just sit in the back until,
Yeah. Sit down here. Correct.
okay, fine.
El dog que me dijiste, Tony. Dale.
Oh,
That's close enough.
okay.
How you doing?
I'm doing good.
Good evening. We would like to tell you about our Washington DC trip. We've been planning this, and due to COVID, we've had issues with not being able to go. So we still have an opportunity to go. The dates for our trip have been changed to June 20th through the 22nd, which are the last 3 days of the school year. As was previously the case with Discovery, they're asking for a COVID test 3 days prior and a test the day of. And as is the case, if the child gets sick on the test, on the date, they've instructed in there, and this was all put in our packet, that they will take the person who's exhibiting sick symptoms and put them and isolate them. We'll have their medical card because World Stride, the company we're using is World Strides. It's world renowned. It's renowned for setting up these trips and giving even high school credit for studying where they do overseas and locally. They have 24 hours, 7 days a week medical personnel, which will be part of it's part of our package. We will have the students' medical cards, so if they do get sick or exhibit symptoms at the time, they will be isolated, and World Strides will pay to fly the parents down to pick up the children and send them back, according to what I've been told and also according to what's inside of the pack. The students will be required to wear a mask on the bus, and I understand it's a long ride, but they do have stops. When they're on the bus, they have to wear the mask, and when they're indoors, they have to wear the mask. There's 4 students to a room, so they are going to be the same students. They're going to be sharing the room. There's no switching of rooms or going into each other's rooms. They have provided us with a night chaperone so that there'll be additional security to make sure the kids are where they belong. This is 6th, 7th, and 8th. We find that this is an awesome opportunity, yes, I use the word awesome, because our kids need to understand and see the places that they're learning about. And they will be with experienced people who know Washington, D.C. and can tell them the history and the importance of what goes on in the city. Did I cover it?
Did you want to add anything?
We're just really excited for our students to have such an incredible opportunity. This trip, they had started to plan back in the spring of 2020. So it's been pushed back quite a bit. And I think the school community is just really looking forward to having their children have these amazing experiences. And World Strides really does take everything into account above and beyond. So our parents and families feel confident and comfortable, not only with the amazing learning experiences, but that safety is the #1 priority.
Do you have any questions from board members?
I'm just looking at, this one actually does mention the PCR test. It says PCR test within 3 to 5 days or the antigen test taken within 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't have to take a test the day of.
Well, the woman on the phone told us day of. So I'm sorry. I was
Take it the day of as well? Okay, that makes sense. So I'm just a little confused. This is my personal confusion about the antigen test,
correct.
right? Are there 2 types of antigen tests, like rapid and non-rapid, or?
Our plan is for
Oh, it's just antigens, just the rapid, right? It's
Right.
like interchangeable? Okay.
and that was our
That's clear. Okay, thank you. So they could use an antigen test in this place of the PCR. So my concern is just if it's the PCR, you got to schedule that way out ahead and make sure that's good. But I did have questions before I looked at this, but I don't anymore. I'm just concerned about the mask requirements on the bus, since it is a very long trip.
Right.
And they're going to be on a bus for a long time, and they seem to have it in all indoor spaces as well. So I'm fine.
If you guys need support with the PCR tests, we could possibly see if the health department will send out the mobile unit on the day of to the school rather than scheduled separately.
So World Strides on the call said that it's either the PCR or the rapid.
Okay.
And because of the move off of the rapid, we have the availability.
Okay, great.
We already spoke to all of the parents.
Great.
Mr. Lombard, any questions?
No questions. I hope they have a great time. As long as it gets passed eventually.
Mr. Benaham?
Yes, I'm going to ask you the same question I asked before. When they come back, are they going to do the test?
No,
Before? No?
there's no school when they come back.
Oh, no, come back. Okay,
School's
okay.
over.
I apologize.
It's the final.
The last thing I'm thinking, I know.
They come back and go on summer break.
Yes, summer break. All right, I'm sorry for that. But, just have a good trip. And the next time, by one of the board members, I would love to go. For the next trip.
It's still not over. You can go.
Not very hard trip. I have been to the, but you know, have a good trip and make glad you guys do this for the kids.
Great.
Kids are gonna remember. You know, thank you for everything you do.
I have a question.
Sure.
What are some of the sites you'll see?
Oh,
best question.
that's the best question. I mean, we are going to Martin Luther, as a matter of fact, switch glasses again. We're going to Smithsonian Institute, Martin Luther King Jr., Mount Vernon. We're trying to get them, they're still working on trying to get us into the African American Museum history because they just started letting tours back in. There was no tours when we started booking. So, and we're going to the Holocaust Museum, the Reagan International, the Museum of American History, everywhere. That's just the first 2 days. I didn't even look at the other 2 days. It's going to be great. We're going to do a walk by Capitol Hill and the White House.
I love DC.
Oh,
That's my favorite.
I love it, and I feel like it'll open these kids' eyes. It's something that I don't think many of them. I didn't have the opportunity. I want them to have the opportunity.
It's a great trip.
Just be sure to bring pictures, share pictures.
Oh, we're gonna have pictures.
They also provide each student with a journal. So every site that we visit, there are journal prompts and questions along with it for the students to use as reflection. We do have one here if you're interested in looking at it. Sure.
You got
I
it.
got it.
Go Google it. So, I mean, we've been looking forward to this, and
Good, that's good.
You also came prepared about if a kid gets sick.
Yes.
It's good to know that the parents will be able to be flown there to pick up their child.
but we do have a journal. There is a journal. They've dropped off a lot of stuff for the kids.
Oh, it was submitted with our packet. We don't have one
Oh,
here.
it's-
This is the secret chaperone one. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay.
These are the teacher chaperone handbooks.
But there's one specific for each child attending in addition.
It looked like you guys are more excited than the kid.
Oh,
I don't know about that. I think we're pretty much there together.
I am so excited about this for the kids. You don't understand. It's been driving me.
Yeah, it's good because for 2 years, we're not doing nothing. You know, kids, they cannot go nowhere because they now have to be free, you know, with safety. It's awesome.
And the parents asked a lot of questions about safety. So like any questions, and it's great that we have a person who will work our case.
How many chaperones are going again?
8, and we have 39 students. We have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8 chaperones, 39 students.
Any additional questions, discussion? I'll entertain at this point a motion to submit to the full board for approval.
So moved.
I wasn't done.
Oh, I know what you're gonna say.
I have to get the name in there. A motion to submit to the full board for approval, Winthrop Schools field trip to Washington, D.C., the end of June.
So moved.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it. Motion's been approved. Be submitted to the full board at the next meeting. I look forward. Let us know if you need any board chaperones.
No problem. We can always make room for one more.
So when this goes to the full board, should we come and present to the board as well?
Yes.
Please, yes.
Just let us,
Great.
we'll be there. We have nothing.
Yeah, the next full board meeting is
Monday.
April.
Monday.
Monday. April 7th.
That's Monday, yes.
Yep,
I'm available.
I'm available. 6:30. I'll see you there. All right. Thank you very
Thank you
much.
so much for your time.
Thank you for being here.
Good night, ladies.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
I think a board retreat to DC might be in order next year.
I make a motion for that improvement.
Honestly, I don't think I'll, oh wait, we lied.
Please, Joe.
So with that, we're going to move on to the next item on our agenda is discussion and possible action on student sport participation, grade requirements, and enforcement.
So I did bring some data that after the last board meeting, I asked the schools to submit their rosters as well as grades for those children who participated in middle school basketball, boys and girls. So today we finalized, after gathering all the information from the schools, and I did send a copy to Mr. Lombard. This is, take one and pass it. Those are the overall. This is by school and class for the girls. And this is by school and class for the boys. So there really is no criteria. However, as you can see, it was noted by the schools how many students from each boys and girls were removed, either for A, academics, or B, for disciplinary reasons throughout the school, the basketball year. Now, this is a short season. It's not, a 20-game season that we run. We started it a little bit later this year because of the COVID pandemic and the Omicron that was going through, and we didn't begin this. We pushed it out. I believe we started the last Saturday in January. That was the tip-off. Three divisions that played, Harding Central and Bassick, were the locations, as we typically do. This year, Caribe was the provider, and we just finished and culminated the season last weekend with the championship games. Gives you a breakdown of the students that participated. 175 boys, 145 girls. That is a significant number of children that we've been able to engage back after the pandemic in middle school basketball after 2 years. I think one of the things that is worth noting, that this is an opportunity to engage kids. There is historically always been some accountability for students and families to make sure that their grades and their academics and their attendance throughout the season. These grades are as of the end of the second quarter, which would be reflective of end of January prior to the season starting. And again, these are middle schoolers. We want to engage as many children as possible. I think one of the things is that we need to make sure that these kids are engaged in after-school activities where we can continue to have a positive influence on them before they get to high school, when it comes to grades, when it comes to behavior, when it comes to attendance, and having a hard-nosed policy that if you're not doing this, you can't play. I think just makes it more difficult, because the only other option then is for them to leave the building at the end of the day, and either they go home and play video games, or they're on the streets in many cases, or they're just home. And I think it's great that we were able to engage well over 300 students for middle school basketball, and hopefully it trickled down to sixth graders this year too, which is something that was really never the case unless they were exceptionally good. And we wanted to engage more kids to try to build and get more kids out there since the pandemic. So again, a positive year, I think.
So I have a question.
Sure.
For middle school, there's no hard and fast requirement for academic performance.
There is no, that's not something that is utilized, statewide or anything like that. I mean, we could create a policy. I think, we need to be cautious, because when you look at the promotion requirements, we really only look at English and math.
Mm-hmm.
So for the end of the year, we don't hold kids back in middle school if they fail any other courses. And we really try to provide them with opportunities to make sure that those English and math grades get the attention they need prior to leaving 8th grade. Last year, we did have a summer school component, and we plan on having a summer school component again. We've identified roughly about 57 kids that we want to target in the 8th grade that are on the fence, that if they attend the summer program, that was a combination of academics in the morning and enrichment activities in the afternoon, coding, robotics, things of that nature, that then they would successfully be promoted to 9th grade.
Okay.
And then it was also, those 57 kids were targeting any other kids. We made it open to all 8th graders that wanted to come last year and will want to come this year, we'll accept them as well. Even if they only want to come for the enrichment component in the afternoon, the more kids we can get involved, especially at those middle grades, it's critical.
Is there any questions from board member or committee members? Mr. Lombard?
So I just, so I understand, we're discussing possibly implementing academic standards for sports that are not currently in place. Is that the purpose of the discussion?
Oh, the purpose of the discussion is the enforcement of the academic policy. There appears to be no academic policy for middle school students. We could bring that up but that would go to the governance committee. It would be governance.
I think academic standards could stay in teaching and learning. If we choose to, but part of why this was referred to committee was that there's none at all. And it's questioned on the middle school. Right now, we only have middle school basketball data in front of us. But and we'll have to have it at a later date, information for high school sports as well. The enforcement of the policies, because in part, yes, we're encouraging students to do something positive after school that's in a safer environment and encouraging them. There is the summer enrichment program that also will help youth matriculate into high school. However, being able to have realistic standards that if you are failing in middle school, you may not be able to play in high school. So we want to be able to encourage them to do positive activities after school while providing them with, like, the reality is if you want to continue to play into high school, these are the requirements. And whether we need to implement academic requirements is a possibility. But seeing as there's no policy, that's something that can potentially be entertained here.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. So with that, I'll just ask Mr. Testani, I mean, is this something that is you feel is needed? Something we should really give, I mean, we're going to give thought to it anyway, but something that you think would be helpful with that middle school population with the sports?
You know, I think that it's a slippery slope, and when we get into the high school policy and practice, hear a little bit more, because this is where we can capture the kids as well that may historically be off to a bad start for the school year, and this is an opportunity to re-engage them. We're hoping that, you know, throughout the season, having rules and regulations, as you could see, there was 8 boys that were removed from teams because they could not live up to whatever standards within the school building. I'm sure they were given several warnings, mostly about behavior and attendance and academic achievement, and 3 girls. But one of the things that we started to discuss last year, and we need to revisit, is putting together an athletic handbook. You know, we talked to coaches. And that came about after I received a call from a parent when we had to cancel the football season last year, prior to the CIAC shutting down. The mom was adamant that her son was being a college opportunity was being taken away when I canceled the season. I knew 2 days later it was going to happen anyway. But looking at the child's transcript, that specific season, he would not have been allowed to play anyway because he had failed all his courses in the fourth marking period of his junior year, which made him academically ineligible. So I brought the coaches together and we started having a conversation about the responsibility at the high school level from the day the child enters in as a freshman and plays on that freshman team, and the expectations of talking with the children, educating them and educating their families, not only on academic eligibility, but the NCAA clearinghouse, and putting in, like other districts do have, an athletic handbook that spells out not just the academic standards, the NCAA clearinghouse information, but also kind of a code of ethics that you would expect your student athletes to be role models within the school building. So we started to talk about that, and we now need to bring everyone together. I had a couple of samples that I shared. Staples High School has a really extensive one. A good friend of mine, Chris Fulton, is the athletic director at Windsor High, previously at Capital Prep, and he was more than willing to come down. Again, former football coach that won state championships, but also a former student athlete at Brian McMahon High School in his day and at University of Rhode Island, to work with our coaches to help, and just on his own volunteer time to do that. So we're going to take advantage of these folks to do something.
Okay. So you mentioned that the 8 boys and 3 girls that were removed, and that would be from certain schools that have policies. So I would think it'd be beneficial for the purposes of what we're discussing. I don't know if the other board members could put this out there, that if we were able to get some information from those schools that choose to have those policies, because you talked about it's a slippery slope, and this is where you capture them, and it would, all the positives in not wanting to keep kids out. However, it sounds like some schools do have policies, and I would think that it would be important, if I'm understanding it correctly, that some schools do and others don't. I would think that it would be important that it's universal across the district. So it's not some schools do it, some schools don't do it, and to see how it's working in those that do. Is that on target there, what I'm saying?
Well, I think they all have some sort of standards. I think it's just a matter of, in these cases, these were student athletes that just did not heed the warnings. A lot of the times it's more about discipline and attendance than it is about the academics, because it is such a short season. So, we can bring some of those principles to the table to talk about what they do within their schools, and brainstorm some ideas. I think it'd be helpful. I just don't want to put something in, that's so
Restricted.
restrictive. That's a good word. That, we don't give kids an opportunity to do better.
Right.
Because historically, when I coached, especially at the high school level, when the kid does not see an opportunity to work his way back, you'll lose them all altogether.
Yeah.
And if they don't play one season, especially the way the CIAC rules are now, you have all 4 years of your eligibility, and that's it. So every year you don't play, you lose out.
I guess I was just focusing for this conversation on the middle schools, but we're going to talk. Are we talking about high school tonight also? Or
I think for the purposes, because we have this data in front of us, we should restrict it to middle school, but use high school also as part guidance, that
Right.
there is additional requirements pursuant to the CIAC for student athletic performance.
yeah.
But I do agree with, even if it is more of a flexible standard of a combination of, beware of your academic performance, because it is hard to read from the graph the information provided, but my biggest concern is I don't want a student that's failing all their courses to play with the unrealistic expectation that that's what is going to matriculate throughout middle school and beyond middle.
Yeah, so to your point, because we removed the names of the kids, obviously, in the public document, but there was not one child that had multiple Fs on their report card that was able to stay on the team.
And just to continue a little bit, I think you made an interesting point about promotion being for language arts and math. So if we were to hold them to a standard of something that's not going to hold them back to go to the next grade level, I don't know. Well, we still could, but that's just something to consider. The other thing I wanted to just, one more thing, is you talked about the potential for an athletic handbook and getting coaches together, and how does that happen logistically? Is that like a PD, a professional development, that they're paid for, or what? How does that work to do something like that? To get them to come together to write that.
Well, I mean, I think most coaches will donate. They donate a lot of their time anyway. The stipend they receive for coaching at the high school level is minuscule, especially compared to other districts. So they don't do it for the money. Right. They have a genuine care to work with their student athletes. So I think if we brought coaches together, I think for the betterment of the student athletes, they'll be more than willing to participate in creating something that, in essence, it makes their lives easier too, because now they have something to refer to when they sit down with a kid and with a parent to say, hey, this is what you need to improve upon. And the NCAA clearinghouse stuff is critical, because I think that's the component that needs to be stressed here, especially for students that have the ability to play in college. The statement was made that kids aren't going to college now because of academics. To be honest with you, they will find a way to get you through if they want you to play, if you have the talent enough to play. It may not be your freshman year. You may have to go to a junior college for a year, or to a prep program for a year, if academically. But there's also, the kids need to understand the sliding scale. If your GPA is a little bit lower, your SAT scores need to be higher, and vice versa. So there's a lot of information that needs to be discussed, but it has to start in the freshman year when they start building their transcript, when they build their resume, because that's where you capture them, that freshman year. And every kid that played sports in high school, we all had either baseball, football, or hoop dreams that we're going to go pro, and we know that's not the case for 99.9%, but there are a lot of opportunities to get a college education at no cost or very little cost. And if you can play, there's somewhere for you to play. The coaches will find you. They find kids from all over the world now. So we just want to make sure that we're able to work with kids from their freshman year so they can build that resume, they build that transcript, so they're not stuck their senior year with a broken heart. I mean, I could name a number of kids over the last 25 years that were extremely talented, but they didn't heed the warnings all the time that their grades were going to matter. And we don't want, those are tough stories to hear, because if they don't see, the North Carolinas and the Kansases and the UConns, they think that a lesser opportunity is not sufficient. But if you can play the game you love in college and get a college education out of it, I think that's a win for any kid.
Mr. Kolovec?
Yeah, I'm remembering back to when they did cancel the season because of COVID. One of my saddest days on the board is when one of the students came and said, "Sports is my only way out." Now that's heartbreaking for any student to see. I mean, our students should know, first and foremost, educational almost guarantee you a way out. And I think we should have some standards to prepare them for the high school standards. Not as stringent maybe as the high school standards, sort of like we do with the magnet school. The magnet school's got standards to prepare them for the high school standards that they're going to be held to a standard, but perhaps if we step down. But also I would like to know if, it's a two-pronged thing in my head. One, yes, it captures the kids and it keeps them from the streets and gives them something to do in some cases, but in other cases, it might distract them from their education. So it's a balancing act. And from this data, I really can't tell much, because this hasn't been disaggregated to distinct students, correct? This is just, because we got 700 different classes here with grades. So this could be like one student with an F and 2 Ds and a D plus, and there could be other students with 3 A's and an F. I think it would be interesting to look at the GPA of the students participating in sports versus the ones not in sports, to see if there's a big disparity between the two, to see if it's being affected or not. Is it possible to disaggregate the data to that point?
I can ask. I don't think we don't calculate GPAs in middle school.
I have to comment on that, because I think what we're trying to get at is the kids who are playing sports and having standards for them. But to compare the GPA of kids who do play sports and don't play sports, that's apples and oranges. I put that out there.
Yeah, but that's it's a decent point unless you take it a step further and think about it. Are we going to necessarily put more stringent requirements on our sports players if their GPA isn't being affected, and let the people who take after school arts programs off scot-free? If we're just looking at them and they're gonna be, if any extracurricular activity affects your grade point, and we focus in on sports and punish them and remove them from their extracurricular activity, well, we're not doing so for anything else that affects them.
Well, that's a good point.
That would be inequitable.
That's a valid point.
Yeah.
Joe.
Well, and to your point, there's been, discussions at the collegiate level for years, that they look at the grade point average and the graduation rates of football programs and basketball programs. And they criticize and they analyze that, but no one ever looks at the graduation rates and the grade point averages of non-athletes. And in most universities, especially the Division I universities, the grade point average and graduation rates of non-athletes is much lower. But there's this belief that because you're a student athlete and you may have received a scholarship, that we hold you to a different standard. And I don't think that's fair, because these are still 12 and 13-year-olds. And
first
I don't want to be punitive, but at the same time, I think we have some teachable moments.
Right.
Because if they're told they can't do something, I'll be honest with you. This is a discussion here, and Clayton, I think, is here, and I love Clayton. The bigger issue is the AAU programs and the other programs who have no standards. They let the kids play as long as you can win games, or you can go out there and put the ball in the hoop or do whatever. They let them play. So if we allow kids to go away, they fall prey to those. And that's been my argument as to why we should have high school coaches more involved in our student athletes year round. The CIAC doesn't allow it. And that's why these AAU programs have popped up all over the country.
I have to clarify AAU.
Jim, what's AAU stand for? Amateur, yeah, American Amateur. These are
youth sports.
and these are sponsored by, sneaker companies and everything else. And they want the best players to play in their programs, and then they guide them to where they want to guide them for money. I mean, it's a moneymaker. And who has the best interest of the student? Their high school coach or their school folks. So if we say to these kids, you're off the team, they're going to find somewhere else to play. There's tons of leagues around Bridgeport, and they don't ask for report cards. They don't ask for anything. But then when that kid, Yeah. And when then they're good enough, they try to guide them somewhere for personal gain. So I would rather them stay in the schools and play in the schools and have that teachable moment than they go play and for, you know, whatever league somewhere else. And it's tough.
I mean, I agree it's tough. I had the very unexpected, well, no, it was expected. When I was teaching, one of my students did go pro. They get a full ride to LSU and now plays for Tampa Bay. The odds were definitely not in his favor for that. But I also saw the remainder of all my other students that didn't make it, as well as in that entire district that didn't make it that far. And it's, in part, yes, you want the reality sets in, but also being a part of it is, yeah, you could play and get the college scholarship. In part, I want to see our students succeed beyond that, be able to read, oh, this is a bad contract, or this is an agent taking advantage of me, and be astute enough to not fall prey in that. And I think that's where the emphasis on at least ELA being able to read your contract and being able to think critically is important to show them very early on, whether it's just keeping it focused on middle school, whether it's a policy that sets in a reminder or a policy that, listen, if you were in high school right now, you would not be playing. The reality check needs to be there so that way they're not taken back. Like, I'm the best player at this school and I'm definitely going to play for Hardin. And then the reality of the standards, which are different, sets in. Can't make any, I don't think it's necessarily right to make any exceptions, but to strongly encourage earlier that the way out is through school. You can make it pro and someone will take advantage of you and take all your money away. And what was based off of a talent or one injury, you have to be able to rely on your brain after that. And so I think it does start early in being able to track it, and by track it, either it's some kind of encouraging policy, a handbook. This is the best practices from the schools that have implemented it, whether it is based off of more of behavioral or not. I think it's good for students and parents because it's always student first, student athlete. So we have to keep the student in it, and encourage the student portion of it. Because you can make it pro, and there's plenty of, especially NFL athletes, that will talk about how they went broke immediately afterwards because of bad deals. I was a recruiter at one point in my life, and I saw the resume of someone that played in the NFL and couldn't spell the NFL, the National Football League. I didn't offer that interview.
No, I think you guys are right on target. That's why, to Mr. Sokolovic's point, when the student made that statement regarding the football season, that's when I gathered the coaches at Harding and we had the conversation, and that's where the handbook idea, but also the responsibility that they had not to give these false impressions that kids have only one way out, because I think that's irresponsible as a coach to put that seed in their head. And I know it's sometimes used as a motivating tool, but that's a fine line you walk between motivating a child and then having them put all their eggs in that basket, because then when the injury happens or they don't do what they're supposed to do in the classroom, we don't want them to give up and drop out of school because they no longer can play the game because they lost their only way out. I think that's where I think some of the heartaches that some of our high schools are having right now is they're trying to implement standards with their teams, whether it comes with discipline, attendance, and grades, and kids don't want to fall into that in line, and they quit. But I do give our basketball coaches a lot of credit at Central Harding and Bassick for trying to build a program, not just win games. And unfortunately, that culture shift is taking some time. But I'd love to have them come to the next meeting, maybe give an invite to the football, basketball coaches to come out and just talk a little bit about, even the soccer coaches, because I know they were the ones that saw some of the collateral damage that having a policy that maybe could have been, if they were asked for input, could have worked a lot better than it did when it was implemented. And then, as you could see, this policy, before Ms. Baptiste Perez brought it to my attention, since it hasn't been utilized in a decade, I thought it was overturned. I never knew it was just ignored for a decade. But I think if we're going to look at it and dissect it, getting their input is going to be important, because I know there was a couple of kids that really suffered that first year. I know there was a soccer player that, at Bassick that comes to mind that just dropped out of school when he just couldn't have the opportunity, because Mr. Denton was the athletic director in helping to develop this, and he didn't really have a lot of say in it. That's why I brought him here. He had some at the time. But the way the grades come out for eligibility, they don't align with the policy. So as a football player, it goes by your fourth quarter grades. So at the end of the school year, if you're not academically eligible, tutoring's not going to help you, because by the time your grades come out, the season's over. So you missed the whole season. So you're not going to go to tutoring for what's the incentive? So I think we have to do something that aligns with the seasons, the marking periods, and the eligibility that could support kids that need the support with required tutoring, but also not allow them to play. Because once that carrot's gone, they just give up, and then we lose them completely.
Yeah, maybe that's something I agree, because there's different starts to different sports seasons, and what's going to be my experience is that it was a lot of carryover, because I worked in a small school in the South. So the football players immediately went into the basketball teams.
Right.
And it was one school. The two schools merged, but two high schools merged, but it's one big school. And so it was a lot easier to track, because if you were qualified to play football,
You automatically went into.
we're going right into the
Yeah,
next
gotcha.
season playing basketball.
I mean, Mr. Denton brought a copy just to let you see what the CIAC's handbook of policies, rules, and regulations that governs the entire state of Connecticut. It's 200 and some odd pages long.
Oh, so it's a good thing I brought donuts, so we could stay here all night and read it.
Yeah, you want coffee too?
I want a virtual donut, please.
Governing body for high school athletics is the CIAC, which we're a member of, all three of our high schools. So we're bound by that 250-page handbook, and it outlines just about every scenario, everything you could think of in regards to eligibility, grades, residency, and the real strong point with that is, that's been developed over years with the CIAC and their attorneys, and they'll defend it. If someone would like an appeal process, it goes right through the CIAC.
Did you read that book?
It's a comprehensive document.
Did you read that book?
Pretty much, yeah, I've read the whole thing.
So if I understand then, because I was trying to understand this, So our policies, as far as standards to play, have to fit within the CIAC standards. Is that
For
correct?
high school.
They can go beyond.
Yeah, they can
So
go beyond.
we could
Adam.
do more, but we have to do at
Yes.
least that, right?
It's the floor.
Yes.
Right, it's the floor.
Right.
So, for example, you have to pass 4 classes to play. Now, in the past, that was a troubling thing because in most schools were running 7 or 8 periods a day. So you could pass art, you could pass computer class. I mean, you wouldn't have to pass core academics. Now we're semester based. There's only 4 classes in a semester. So you're passing everything and they have to be core classes except maybe one elective. So our new block schedule increases the standard for student athletes automatically.
Right.
But if we want to raise the bar to more than just a kid that gets 4 Ds, I think just talking about the timing is important.
So I just would like to share my thoughts. They're not a lot, so I won't take that long. But I'm thinking of what Mr. Sokolovic said, and it really is a very good point. I feel like on the one hand, if a student is satisfactorily passing the school standards, they shouldn't be deprived from engaging in extracurricular activities, on the one hand. Now, at the same time, we have the CIAC standards, which are higher than our school standards. So they have to for those particular sports, not for others. And for that matter, that example of the art class or whatever, or chess club, they're not required to. So it is a different standard based upon, in this case, CIAC for high school. And the other thing I want to say is, and I'm saying this from my own personal conclusions and not having been a big high school athlete, nothing like that. High school sports are not the same as chess club. They're not the same as art club. People look to them, they look up to them. They're held in high esteem, for better or for worse, right or wrong. They just are. So for that reason, I would think one of the most important things we should require are behavior standards. Attendance, behavior, separate from, in addition to grades. I feel like, if and that would in some ways possibly, if presented the right way, instill a lot of pride in these players. Like, look, you're having to meet these standards because of what you're doing. So I don't know, I just wanted to share that. And I know there's a lot more to this discussion, but that's it. Okay.
Mr. Benham?
Yes, please. Thank you. Mr. Testani, I see in the girls' middle school basketball and in the boys' middle school, in the girls, we don't have no Barnum school, cross school, and marine. In the boys, we don't have career. But also, when I see the difference of the subject, it looks for girls' school, we don't have this 3 school, but the percent, I said the percent, the numbers is more high than the boys. You understand my question?
What do you mean by higher than the boys?
Okay, right now in the girls' middle school basketball, you don't have no Barnum school, no cross school, and no Marion school, right? But when I see the numbers here, the A, B, and C, 1, 2, 3, whatever you guys put here, it's more high than the boys. And then the boys, you don't have career school, the middle school. You got my point?
Mr. Gustafson, I only sent in, I believe he did send in both.
And I believe he coaches both.
I sent data management, put this from all the spreadsheets that were put in. But I'll go back and double check to see.
Because I was looking this, but
Curiel does have both. I'm not sure if the other schools did have both.
And they're very
I know some schools had difficulty securing a coach.
Yeah.
okay. And I see the difference, but when I see the difference that the girls, they don't have, you're missing like a 3 school here, but the numbers about B, A, B plus and everything, it's more high than the boys. I was looking at the difference, that's why.
You
Just
said
curious, that's all.
the girls are academically performing better than the boys?
Probably about
It
right.
looks like, yeah,
Yeah, well, I mean,
yeah. And then the black on school and boys is more high than the girls on middle school.
these are just, grades are grades.
I know, of course.
This is what they've
Of
earned.
course, I know. I understand. I just want to agree with that.
Yeah.
Come, no more questions.
Just for clarification, and I was trying to keep it very separate between middle school and high school, but we're still jumping.
Yep.
And this is a high school related question. You mean to tell me I can have 4 Ds and play basketball in high school? Like Ds?
Play any
threes?
sport. You have to be passing 4 classes by CIAC.
CIAC state.
Okay with the D.
And what's the odds of success if I have straight D's throughout my high school career? I'm going to go to college and actually graduate. I sprained my ankle, so my ball career is done.
Well, the chances of you at straight D's going through high school and getting into college, except for Housatonic or a community type college, is probably your best shot. That's why
I go to Kansas or I want to go to UConn.
I'm going to UConn, I can tell you that.
Well, the history behind the policy that's in the policies right now, there was an exceptional athlete that got a full athletic scholarship, but he could not pass the clearinghouse. Well, now with the COVID, the SATs are lax, but back then your grade point average was proportionate to your SAT. High SAT, you could have a lower grade point average. High grade point average, you could have a lower SAT. This individual that was gifted, you don't see him very often come through, as you know. He couldn't make it through the clearinghouse. So the people in charge at the time felt that was a real disservice. But this individual went to a prep school, like many student athletes do, not just in Bridgeport, across the state, across the country. He prepped for a year. He got his athletic scholarship. He had a wonderful career. He graduated college and he played professional sports. But out of high school, he couldn't take the scholarship. So this was all discussed. This was back in 2007 or so. And that's this core, we used to call it 4 core to score. You had to pass 4 core classes instead of getting 3 Ds in phys ed, art, music, and you'd have to get at least, at one point it was a B. You had to get Bs in 4 core classes. But it really turned into the stick or the carrot, because it ended up being what's in there now with, the student would be required to go for tutoring after school to remain on a team if he didn't have a C- in 4 core classes. And there was a hardship waiver in there, and pretty much every student that didn't make the criteria, presented some type of hardship, and most of them were all approved to continue with their athletics. And it got to the point where people said, well, maybe the carrot would be better than the stick. Because now if you did have a student that was struggling, like Mr. Testani said, you're going to lose them. They're going to be gone. So would it be better to have a student on a team meeting the CIAC minimum guidelines, still playing, still participating, or a student us telling, well, you can't do it, you can't play?
I just think I get it. And I acknowledge that I could see the pushback with 4 core to score. It's just, I personally think it's a little bit dubious that you're going to get the really high SAT score to offset all the Ds.
Well, now the SATs are gone. Most colleges, they don't even accept this. They don't even need it. You don't need an SAT. Now you just need the core grade point average.
May I see the academic performance requirements that we have currently in our policy?
And another big,
To your point, you're right. A child who does not perform in the classroom, the chances of them scoring high on the SAT is unlikely.
Because I'll finish and then I'll pass it over to you, Mr. Lombard. The point is to prepare our students for the real world. That's part of like the vision is that they should be able to be successful, functioning people, and education, as Mrs. Sokolovic said, sports is the only way out. And the odds of success are so minuscule to make it like professional. And also you have to just deal with all the vultures of the real world, with agents, attorneys, bad contracts, that I want our students to be academically equipped to be successful outside of it. But I'm going to take Mr. Lombard because he was next, and then I'll do you, Mr. Skolvic.
Actually, if it's all right, I'll let Mrs. Colvitt go because he's been waiting.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see.
No,
Now
no
it's the
worries.
issue.
I can see from my angle.
Oh,
I agree.
oops.
Yeah, I'll go through an evolution of sorts in my thinking because the CAIC got the rules for the high schools. And that's a reality that we can't change. And I think rather than being a floor, it should actually be the ceiling. And here's why. We got students walking for their diplomas every year who may have D's in all their classes. They meet the criteria to graduate high school and go out in the world and do what they have to do. And unfortunately, I never push this and I always push back against it. Not everybody is going to go on to college anyway.
Correct.
Some kids will go on to trade schools and what have you. And are we going to, like we said, when people look up to that, you might want to make a different standard. The kids in other clubs, the comic book clubs, the drama clubs, and if you're in drama and you got 4 Ds, you can't play or something like that. So I think because those rules are in effect for the CIAC and we have no control over them, that our policy for high school should mirror that. But on the other hand, I think we should have some policies in place for the middle school, but not as stringent as the high school requirements. Maybe like 10 to 20% down, just throwing a random number, 10 to 20% down, less restrictive, just so they know the rules are there and this is what you're going to have to do when you get in high school. So they're not facing culture shock like the kid gets. He'll fail like 2 electives or something like that and still be able to go on to high school somehow. And then expects to be able to do that in high school and then comes to the culture shock and he can't play or whatever have you.
Bring up a good point though, because that was some of the arguments that were made over 10 years ago were, all right, are we going to start requiring standards for kids to go to the prom? Are we going to start requiring standards for kids to, go participate in the clubs? Why are you picking on the athletes? Why aren't you looking at everyone? There was my argument to the board several years ago was to go to only one class in summer school for a more significant period of time, because as the summer school principal, I saw kids every year coming for 2 classes. And they were their math classes, their science classes, and their English classes. So they were graduating with 8 of their credits of the 22 and a half at that time from summer school. So to me, talk about watered down to, high school diploma. So, and for 2 hours for 48 hours of summer school, you were getting your credit the same as a kid who sat for the entire year. So I think you're right. I think we do need to establish something, but I think the workshops for parents and for kids, maybe starting in 7th grade, that are athletes, that are mandatory, that they sign off when they receive the information, can be very helpful in educating them of what's to come. But to Mr. Lombard's point, I'll tell you, I never had an issue with discipline or attendance in 7 years at Bassick High School with the basketball players.
I can say I've seen firsthand even though there's no formal policy with the middle school requirements, the principals use it. It's a valuable tool to encourage students to do well, to attend school, to follow the rules. I know on many occasions, students have been sat out from a game.
Mr. Lombard, you passed it to Mr. Sokolovic and got skipped online a few times.
Okay, that's okay. Thank you. It's a very good discussion, and I think, I think we're all circling around the same point of view with a little bit tweaks here and there. Ms. Baptiste Perez, I like what you said about a reminder for the middle school kids. To remind them of what they would need if they were in high school, if they start to drop below that area, if we're not enforcing it because it's a different standard for the middle school, but to actually implement a reminder system, pull them aside, have them be brought to their attention. Just like Mr. Den said, that it's kind of happening, but have it be formalized that exists. So it's not a demerit, it's not a refusal to play, but it's a formal action. I think something like that might be thought about when we talk about this in formulating something. And then I also was going to say, similar to what Mr. Skalvik said about it being the ceiling, unless our school standards are higher than their standards. If our school standards are higher, that's great. But I feel like we shouldn't be setting it. That's it. I don't feel like because we're talking about clubs, activities, prom. I feel like the kids have to meet our school's standards in order to be in school and therefore participate in certain things. And behavior is one of them. Grades may be one of them. I don't think it comes into play for prom, but there's certain standards that are in place, and I feel like we shouldn't be making any one group, athletic or cultural group or cooking group or whatever the group is, any one group have to meet higher standards if it's not relevant. So I feel that way, that it shouldn't be the floor, it should be the ceiling. And that if there are higher standards we're forced to do, or we're not forced to, that we have to do, then we would do them. But except for one thing, I do feel like behavioral standards should be looked at as a separate element, because they really are in the spotlight, and they really do make an impression on people. So that's just a suggestion. So, all right, thank you.
I was holding in my comment.
Okay,
I disagree with letting it be the floor, and part of your comment, Mr. Lombard, it reminds me of what I was always told in college. In college, it's different, but they were like, if you get an A, B, or a C at Cornell, it's an A at any other institution. If I get straight D's at Bassick, is it the equivalent of getting straight D's if I went to high school in Westport? If I was a straight D, it's preparation for the real life, even if it's not necessarily college or anything like that, but being equipped for the real life, like straight D's to get, that beats a whole lot of sayings I've ever heard. I've heard B's get degrees, C gets degrees, now I'm hearing D's. It's like, well, if you show up, we might as well just give you, we have to have some kind of standards for our kids to be academically prepared for the real world, knowing how to read a bank account, knowing how to read a contract, knowing how to read and sign for their first mortgage. And I think low academic requirements in general, when knowing the comparables in other school districts, are we saying, is it being implied that our schools are on par with the top performing schools in this state and in this country? So we're saying you can get straight D's. I don't think that's realistic. No. I think it's a little bit off topic as well.
I think that was misunderstood. I think I was misunderstood. That's not what I was saying. What I was saying is whatever our school's standards are for our students to not be expelled for failing, if they meet the school standards to stay in school, I don't feel like they need to earn higher marks to play a sport. That's what I was saying.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I understand the earning higher, not having to earn higher marks, but just it's also a bit of understanding the predatory nature of these sports groups. Like, what was the acronym again? The
AAU.
The AAU. We will take you if you're utterly failing. These are fields where it can be very lucrative for someone highly educated and persuasive to take advantage and hold a big shiny plastic carrot, knowing that it's plastic, and deceive people. And so I want to be very mindful. Like, I want all our kids to be academically prepared for the real world, and knowing the predatory nature of some of the sports and the sports agents in that particular field, I think is why I'm a little bit heightened with my concern, because of the ability to fall prey and victim. And I think holding high standards in general and high academics is going to be beneficial for our student and our student population, because the reputation may not be there. So that's where I was going with are you really implying that straight D's here are the equivalent to a national standard? I would question that, but I'm not going to get too sidetracked. Mr. Sokolovich, you did have a comment.
Yeah, a couple of things. In glancing through the table of contents, they do have behavioral standards, some behavioral standards in there. I didn't see them all, but they got drug tests, couple of things. So I'm sure there's some behavioral standards in there. And the second thing, comparing us to Westport, let's take that a step further. We got to make sure the cure is not worse than the disease. Let's say we got two children, one in Westport, one in the city of Bridgeport. The Westport kid gets the D's. The Bridgeport gets the D's because we have a more stringent policy than Westport. That child in Westport got a chance to go get a scholarship at a college, whereas we just totally knocked the kid out with the D's, and he lost a leg up that he might have had to get into college had we not had a more stringent policy. And now we were giving the outside districts more of a chance to get a shot at a slot. Now, it's not, I agree 100% education should be first and foremost, but we shouldn't put our kids at a disadvantage of the other districts. I mean, is there any other districts that use more stringent requirements for playing? In a lot of these football schools, they want their kids to play, so I'm just going to assume that for the most part. I'm not too educated on it, but if there is, I don't know.
The vast majority of districts follow the CIAC handbook.
I think one of the issues that we face in Connecticut is there's not year-long contact with the student athlete from the coach. If, for example, because middle school basketball starts late, if we had some sort of intramural program that started in September or even October with that coach running it, that then if the kid is not participating fully in his academics or his behavior, it could affect him later in whether he plays on the team or whether he participates in the intramural. Same thing with the high school basketball coach. We'll stay with basketball. Up until November or maybe late October when there's a team meeting, grades haven't even come out yet. So unless he gives has the wherewithal to say to every kid, go get your teacher to sign off where you're at this year, because we've seen that in the past. But then when the season's over, they're not engaged all year with the kids, which makes it harder. After the freshman year, you can tag those kids and try to say, hey, if you're going to play next year, we need to make sure that you're eligible all year. You don't just get eligible that marking period before, because that's what a lot of kids will do. And then the season ends and academics will drop. But I think if we engage coaches, principals in this committee a little bit to come up with a handbook that incorporates a standard that we hope that doesn't penalize the kid, but we can still have some safety nets, I think it'll be advantageous to the students, because they're the ones that'll benefit. We have to have, I think, a standard to push them, but not, to Mr. Sokolovich's point, to hurt them where they don't play, but in other towns they're allowed to play. So then there's no coming back from it for this season. If a kid is academically eligible, but he didn't meet, like Ms. Baptiste Perez says, he got all D's. All right, you can play, but I want weekly sign-off sheets from your teachers to show that your grades are improving. If not, you can practice, but you're not going to get in the game until those grades go up. Something like that, so they stay engaged, and there's an incentive to improve. I think that'll be helpful for everybody.
I do want to take, one of the visitors here had a comment regarding, Clayton Wilson is here, middle school coach. You want to say a comment, you have to come to the front. So it's recorded for the microphone and we're live. If you wanted to say a comment regarding the middle school athletics, you have to be closer to the front for the microphone.
Well, what I want to say is, I'm not saying to take them off the team. What I'm saying is we hold them to a requirement to stay on the team.
That's, yeah, right.
You know what I'm saying? That's what I'm saying. And as well as you saying that you want to get them ready for freshman year, that's why we implicate 7th to 8th grade, the requirements, so they're already ready. I don't want them to get kicked off the team. I don't kick them off my team if they fail. But we work together to make sure that they're eligible to play. Nobody gets kicked off, but nobody plays until the grades are where they're supposed to be.
No, that's all I'm saying. I think if we work together to come up with not a policy, I think just a standard.
The handbook.
Yeah, I think the handbook would be great, and bringing in, because then parents and students, when they have an understanding of what is expected. Because there is a parent component to this that we tend to sometimes shy away from, but let's talk about the elephant in the room sometimes. You know, I think parents need to be part of the process as well to ensure that homework's being done nightly. You know, great, the behavior and everything else. I mean, it's not all our kids come from homes where they don't have a responsible adult in the house. I mean, that's always the fallback, but that's not true. We have great moms and dads and grandparents, aunts and uncles, and we just have to engage them in the process.
I agree. Everybody needs to be held accountable, not just you, not the coaches, not the teachers,
Right.
the parents as well. Everybody.
Yep.
But when one person is holding them to this standard, one doing this, one doing that, there's no connection. There's no unity in what we're trying to do with the
Right.
kids. Right. What the kids don't understand, they're confused as well. If coach tells me this and then the teacher tell me that, what am I supposed to do?
So
That's what the issue is.
Yep.
So it should be uniformed in the schools. And I like Mr. Lombard's idea of having it uniform amongst all the schools. So getting all the coaches and really getting a sense of the timeline of when certain sports are being performed. That way, on the middle school level, they're getting a reminder, like if you do want to matriculate in the high school and be able to do so, they can do so. But also encouraging academics, like just the reality of becoming the next LeBron James, or the reality of becoming the next Tom Brady, or becoming, it's bad. I'm drawing a blank on like a Venus or Serena, the next big female athlete. I think I want the kids to have that opportunity because there is a lot of benefits to sports, team building, leadership. But I don't want them to lose sight of your way out is the quality of education you're receiving here. And the education you receive here will help you also navigate into the professional endeavors that you choose to succeed in. I do have a question. So there is no tutoring in place?
Informally, there's things happening at the schools that the coaches do in conjunction, like Bernie works with Walter Luckett, and there's tutoring on Saturdays for his athletes. Informally, there's tutoring here that goes on, but nothing that's formalized.
So we have the policy that says core courses will be to attend tutoring. It says C- in a Bridgeport core course will be required to attend tutoring to remain eligible, but it seems like it's lax or not really enforced.
Correct.
Okay.
It hasn't been enforced in a decade. Part of the issue is, again, we have to create a policy if we're going to do a policy for student athletes at the high school that makes sense, that coincides with when they're eligible and when their season starts. Because like I said, if the football coach isn't engaged with the kid in the spring, all the way till the end of the year during the fourth marking period, then it doesn't matter, because once that kid fails the fourth marking period, he can't play in the fall 3 months later. So there's no tutoring going to happen. He's not going to go to tutoring, because even if he gets his grades up, he can't be eligible until the season has one game left. He can't practice. So he's done. He's not going to be showing up for tutoring when there's no incentive. I can't play football this year anyway. See you later.
Got it. And then also, sorry, Mr. Lombardo, finish this one comment. Also, this is specifically for high school only, and this may come down to, again, it needs to be revised because it's dated. It's not clear because it goes elementary and secondary school.
Right.
So I get CIAC is the requirements for high school, but it's not clear when you read the policy, shouldn't our middle school students get tutoring as well? So I think this is an idea of we need to revise our policies, make it up to date, just so it's clear.
Yep.
And I'm like, well, our middle school students needed to get tutoring as well. Now, Mr. Lombard, thank you.
Thank you. What you just said, Mr. Testani, really strikes the chord of what I said earlier. If that student who's no longer eligible to play the following fall is yet still eligible to come back to school, I think there's a discrepancy here. If they're meeting the standards to be in school, unless I don't know. I mean, kids aren't expelled, I guess, these days. Is that what it is for grades? They're not dropped out. I'm not up to speed.
No, you're not you only get expelled for egregious acts of.
So like you could literally have straight Fs all 4 years of high school and be able to graduate.
Legally, as long you can attend until your 21st birthday.
All right. So for social promotion, and then could you actually graduate? Or no, you wouldn't graduate?
No, you would have to pass 25 credits by the time your 21st birthday. Your 21st birthday, you are no longer welcome.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Well, it's extended till 22 right now because of COVID.
All right, I didn't realize that. That's my own bad for not realizing that. So the fact is, students can be in school, meeting school standards, and have a 0 GPA. That's a reality for what we just said. So therefore, we do have to have higher standards than the schools, what they're allowed to have standards for academics. So we do have to create our own, and then it comes down to where do we make, what do we use? You know, I misunderstood. I thought there was a standard to be able to stay in school. I'm sorry, I didn't understand that. Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Kolvik?
Yeah, I'm looking over the policy, that's the same one you got in front of you, the 5116G with the school attendance areas in 2012. It seems to mention the CAIC repeatedly. Is it mirroring the rules in place of the CAIC at the time? And the CAIC has revised this policy?
It was in addition to the CIAC.
This is in addition, so this is, so they had.
That's on top of this. We have to follow the CIAC rules, being that we are a member of the CIAC, but we can add on top of that, like that policy you're reading. And then also in accordance to the CIAC rules, the principal could make a kid ineligible at any point if there's a behavior issue or some kind of other issue going on. So ultimately it's all the principal's discretion.
Yeah, because this is back in 2012, it's at least 10 years old.
One of the things that we were, that came up when this was being implemented was there were a lot of people that were going against it. They were talking about, individuals, not only in Bridgeport, in every town, that never went to college, maybe struggled in high school, and the highlight of their lives are out on that field or out on the court. They're saying, do we want to take that away from a C student or with a couple Ds, you know? I mean, that's not my opinion. I'm just saying that was one of the topics. That was something that came up because there was a whole lot of people that didn't do well in high school, but they were, you know, athletic stars.
Yeah.
And they're not going to college.
That's hard when the peak of the average human being life is 80. You peaked at 16. It's a downhill ride from there, I suppose. But I do have
one more thing he was asking if he
I
could
just
say.
want to ask one thing. We don't see that there's an issue with the kids' highlight of their life is 6 minutes in the varsity.
Absolutely.
Oh, no, that I was being very sarcastic for the
No,
record.
I'm just saying,
Okay.
that's the bigger picture of all of it. You know what I mean? That's the more, you know what I mean?
Well, you know the guys that, you talk to them today, they're, 45 years old and they still talk about that game Central Harding on Thanksgiving Day.
They're on the sidelines.
And that's what they keep talking about and they keep talking about and that's,
I understand,
Yeah.
but we gotta give.
we gotta
kids
strive for more.
something higher to look for.
Absolutely.
But just because he telling me that's what he used, all right, well, I want to go down the street and talk to the dude who tell me how he owned the building that
Right.
I'm talking in front
Exactly.
of. Not about what you.
Well, I would hope too
Yeah.
that the term highlight of their life is like a little tongue in cheek.
No, but that's.
I think it's
going
the
on.
reality.
But I know, like, myself, I mean, I talk with my friends about our high school careers. It's
I get that.
it's a big thing.
That
One
kid
sec.
we talking about, that really is the reality.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's the issue. That can't be a reality.
no, it shouldn't be. And I think that the handbook itself to put something formal, because even a policy that sits buried somewhere on a
For
website.
10 years.
What has it done? I think though, if it's a living document that every kid knows to refer to, every family has it, every coach lives by it, every principal, that's the standard within the district. I think that then starts to shape a better student athlete than just a policy that it's here and, as Mr. Sokolovich says, we're all going to be gone one day. And maybe the next folks don't bother to even look at it.
Mr. Lombard?
Thank you. This is really a big conversation that we're having. And I think, I said earlier, I used the word earn, to earn the right to participate. So here we are, we've got the students who, other than egregious behavior that would get them expelled, academically, they don't need to earn anything to stay in school. So are we going to prevent them from participating in any extracurricular activity whatsoever?
Just sports, because they
Right,
won't meet the CIA.
Just sports. And the reason why it's sports is because of the because of their standards. So an external standard is why sports is the only activity of all activities that we're having any standard whatsoever. So really, it's our athletes. It's our athletes that are the real academic achievers because they have to. And I feel like if we have no standards whatsoever for any extracurricular activity, we have to be careful when we start crafting standards specifically for sports because that could be seen as discrimination. And we have to have standards because an external body is giving us standards. But beyond that, I'm hard pressed to think of where we can justify creating any standards beyond what we have to when we don't do that for any other activity. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Lombard, to comment on that is, what are the odds that, and Mr. Teston, you can tell me how many kids do we have now that are failing straight Fs that are approaching the age of 22 that's still in the school system?
Very few. They usually go away, but I will say there are a lot of kids that, not a lot, but there's a number of kids that are struggling academically, behaviorally, that are in the buildings. Eventually, 18, 19 years old, they do find their way on their own into either work or something else. Unfortunately, we try to re-engage them as much as possible to no end.
And then, this is something that I would like to address at another meeting, but I do want to look into the graduation rates the entering class who graduates on time of it, because we're making the biggest implication is that I am putting myself in the shoes of a high school student that's not doing well academically. I'm going to stick through this and be in class when I'm 19. I'm an adult. There is a dropout rate. And so making the assumption that the sports players are the real academic achievers with the reality of like the dropout rate seems a little bit. Yeah, I know. I know, but there are going to be deeper. You raised your hand? Okay,
Yes,
just want to make sure. I lost track trying to manage. Okay, this is always fun, but I do want to be look into that because that's its own separate issue for a different day. Mr. Sokolovic?
Yeah, I'm going to suggest we put this policy actually up for revision to match the CAIC because I'm looking at our magnet school policies. So some of our most stringent academic schools with requirements. To get reassigned out of a magnet school requires a D. So we're requiring for retention in a program of basketball, a C minus. Yet in our most academically rigorous schools, a D is cause for reassignment.
I see what.
Well, there's.
I think though, if you, by maybe getting rid of I don't get rid of the policy, but then as we do with the student handbook for operations during the day, passing a athletic handbook, then that is the standard that all student athletes would have to live by. And I think putting the behavioral expectations in there, the attendance expectations, naturally then ferment themselves into the academics as well.
Right. For the record, I'm not really a sports guy, arts and extracurricular activity type of guy. I'm the STEM guy. I'm the science, technology, education, and mathematics is what's going to get you out of this system. But I'm also very cognizant of equity and how things hit and how it's going to affect and how it could disproportionately affect their chances versus everybody else. So I'm seeing this in two different ways. Yes, we definitely want athletes to use athletics as a backup plan rather than have athletics as a primary plan so they could have the academics taken care of. And I don't know, this is, you know why this is taking long? Because this is a tough, serious decision. It's going to affect lives going down the line and we got to get it right. So
Maybe there could be a motion to continue discussion upon request of some additional information so we can compare maybe the magnet policies internal for the Bridgeport Public Schools. Focus in on high school. So we have a limit onto the particular school grade. So entertain a motion to table to the next Teaching and Learning Committee meeting, an evaluation of the current athletic academic eligibility for high school students in comparison to the CIAC and other magnet schools for student sport participation grade requirement and enforcement. We can also look to set up maybe a round table with the high school coaches in development of a handbook. Okay, I'm trying to avoid the word policy.
Yeah, so what I'll do is I can get the high school coaches involved, the athletic directors at the 3 high schools. I'd like to ask Dr. Graff, because he sits on the board of the FCAC for several years. And was also a college athlete. I think he would be a great person to kind of lead some of this and maybe get a couple of samples of what other athletic handbooks are in other towns. Because I think some of the things that are spelled out will then naturally impact academic achievement. And I think the responsibilities and roles of the coaches and the families need to be probably included in that.
I agree. So maybe, am I hearing, want to make sure I'm hearing this right. I think there's two separate motions. One is
Convene a committee.
convene on a committee of all the people you just mentioned.
Yep.
To develop a handbook for teaching and learning to approve and then submit to the full board for approval. So I'll entertain that as the first motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion regarding the handbook? All in favor?
Aye.
The ayes have it. So Mr. Testani will work with all the coaches and forgetting names, not my strong suit, to develop a handbook so it can be further reviewed. And then the second potential motion that was on the table, well, that really kind of takes care of it. And then we can
You just don't
really,
gotta take action on the next thing.
we'll take it on. So we're gonna move on to the next item on our agenda.
What's this down?
Huh?
Before I want to have a question to
You
Mr.
know I'll be back.
Yeah, no, that's good. Question?
Y'all have a good night.
Have a
Good night, thank you.
I apologize, Mr. Benaham.
You forgot about me, that's okay.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is the presentation of research on benefits / drawbacks of later school start times.
Okay, so we are going to table the research component. However, there has been some studies done. I mentioned off the record, but we'll talk on the record. Hanover has done an extensive study on this. It is public document that we could utilize if we'd like to not engage in a research project on our own. So I will try to manipulate that document and take away some of the other school district's name off of it to then provide this committee. And then that'll give us a few weeks to review it, come back and have a meaningful discussion around it. Norwalk Public Schools did change start times and then revert back to their original start times because of issues with delays and busing and other things that they did not foresee. Their process was much more quickly done than what was done in a few other neighboring districts that spent about 5 years from start to finish. I would ask, do we want to do just a quick gauge with students or parents on a survey before the next meeting just to see what thoughts, or do you want to wait until we get further along in the process? I'm open to any.
Yeah.
Mrs. Sokolovic?
I think this is something that needs to definitely be scaffolded because we don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole before we see if it's going to be beneficial or if it's. I know I would like it, but by the time this gets finished, my son will graduate. So.
Well, it's funny. This morning on the news, it was actually stated that the state of New Jersey is looking to pass legislation that would require high school start times to be no earlier than 8:30 a.m.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question that it's beneficial. I think the science is clear on that part. But is society clear on that part? And are we going to end up with so much pushback that we can't implement it? And I think that's why a tiered approach is like, first we talk about the research and then we maybe talk about how we present before. Because if we do a survey today, it likely would be no, because the education is just not out there just yet.
Probably.
So if we like maybe do a couple of community forums or something like that to just get the information out there, send literatures home. Do you know that these children who start later do recommend academically better or what have you? And just prime them with some information and even the positives and some possible drawbacks. And then conduct a survey once we got some information in their hands. And plus we got to look at our surveys aren't very well received either. because we got to get a certain response out of those surveys. And we got to tier it, right?
Yeah, I was going to suggest if we were going to do a survey, possibly with report card conferences coming up this month, it could be done quickly and gather a lot of information, but at the same time, it's probably not going to be well received without any.
Yeah, so we can shoot. Oh, sorry. We could shoot for the surveys like probably September or something, because that'll give like back to school nights and stuff like that. We'll have everybody in one place, and in the meanwhile, just disseminate information.
Okay.
That's just an idea.
Mr. Lombard?
Yes, I'd like to echo that. I think that would be putting the cart before the horse, and everyone would just want to push it through. As I had time to actually digest this since the last meeting, I definitely do see a lot of merits in it. However, I feel like we owe it to ourselves as a board to really come to a place where we think in an educated way would be a good idea. And we act as a board as we act, regardless of what certain opinions are sometimes. We make our own informed decisions, taking input like a survey. But I think that, if we're finding that this is a really beneficial thing, all things considered, I mean, unless there was a big backlash of no, I would imagine we would probably move forward. So I think it's better to wait and have the, I don't want to say ammunition, but have the information, have our decision almost formed. Doesn't mean we have to act on it, but which direction we're going, and then gather that. I think that because this is such a big thing, it's so juicy that students will be jumping on. Oh, how does that affect my work schedule? My job starts at 2:30, or what with the babysitting and bring my kids in school? My other kids start school at what time? And does that coincide with them with walking them to the bus and this and that and this and that? Like, it's a huge thing. We talk about the athletic policy being a huge thing, which it is. This could be a very smooth transition. It may go very well if we do this, but nonetheless, it's a big thing. So I'm just, all that being said, I go back to what I first said. I echo what Mr. Sokolovic said. I think we should do our information gathering and maybe some little disseminating here and there, but gotta be careful because that could just set the firestorm going. So I would also say to hold back before doing the survey. That's it.
Mr. Benaham?
No question.
Mrs. Sokolovic?
I agree. I think we should just keep going. It's just that, I don't know, like you said, it's a big piece, and when you start thinking of the whole giant piece at the same time, it'll drive you crazy. So that's why I suggest the tiered approach. A lot of the stuff we do needs to be done a piece at a time. And I think maybe first, like you mentioned the board being educated first and ourselves, which is a good idea. And is this something the entire board wants to take on? Because we will be taking up a significant portion of Mr. Testani's time and school resources. So I think maybe you should bring possibly the research to us, and then I don't know, and then we maybe refer to the full board if we want to take it to the next step. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think that, I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, I think that's a good idea before exhausting all that manpower is to introduce it to the board. So the rest of the board, it will be time consuming. So
I just want to ask, do you want me to get what scenarios would be, as part of the research from the bus company, what they need in terms of timing? Because they rely on the tiered approach, the same buses, same drivers. So I know there's some possibilities. Right now, there's about an hour. I don't know if that hour works the other way, so I'll get some of that as part of the presentation for the next meeting. And then, like I said, I'll clean up the research from Hanover and go through it and then be able to present it. I'll send it to you guys, give you at least 2 weeks to look at it so that the conversation could be productive and you're not digesting it for the first time here.
Mr. Lombard?
Thank you. So what times do the other grade levels start, basically?
So high school, first period starts at 7:53. The Fairchild Wheeler Magnet School ends at 2:10, and so does Bridgeport Military Academy, because there's a 20-minute buffer to get kids bused back to their neighborhood schools to participate in athletics. The other high schools all dismiss at 2:30.
And what about, I'm sorry, was it
And then about an hour later, almost about 50 minutes later, is the elementary start time.
So like 8:40, 8:45?
8:40, correct, yes.
8:40. So then that tiered system with the busing would be a real consideration, because they can't bus everybody all at the same time with not enough buses, so they couldn't, because I mean, the recommended, like you mentioned, the recommended start time was 8:30, but that wouldn't work. I can't imagine, so, yeah.
Right, I mean, I think it could, and I'll double check with Mr. Eiffel from We Transport, if we just say flip-flopped, it would be just a flip-flop. But then again, that then also impacts parents, because as a parent, and the after-school program is affected. So if, say, elementary school started at 8, I think a lot of parents would probably be okay with the start, because they're on their way to work. There's not a worry about before-school care. But now if school ends at 2:30, there's another hour plus of after-school care that I don't know if Lighthouse would have the budget to offer. And they already have some sliding fees. They're not doing it now because of COVID, but if that increases, then that could become a hardship for parents. High school kids, if they start at 8:40 and then would have to end at 3:30, like you said, it impacts jobs, it impacts after-school activities, it impacts all those other things. And then does it impact whether the big brother or big sister is able to walk over and pick up their little sibling or not from school? And so there's a lot of things that go into play. I'm sure in a suburban town, those are some factors that may not be considered, because mom may be a stay-home mom. There's some more resources for before or after school care. They're not relying on, the city's provided Lighthouse program.
Is there, I know when we were talking about busing before, I think we were, I forget what the context was. I think it had to do with, it was expanding the distance or shrinking the distance for qualifying for a bus. Are there other bus, in addition to, if we doesn't have the buses, are there other bus companies that could supplement, that we could use? So we could have the times be pretty uniform?
I don't know it would also increase the cost, obviously, to have all those buses running at the same time.
Well, but we're paying for them in tiers anyway, so we're paying for them twice anyway.
But once they're on the road, we're paying for one bus. To pay for two, the extra bus costs money because of the driver as well. But we pay per day, per bus. We use it, but that's the cost. So every day we use an extra bus, it's just an extra cost.
But maybe we pay a little less, a little less for the one that doesn't have to be on the road as long either. Maybe it would make up the difference, but that would, you see what I'm saying? If we're paying per day and that bus is making 2 separate routes, or however many, if we don't need them for as much, maybe we don't have to pay them as much for that day.
I don't know if they'll find drivers then that are going to take pay cuts as well.
Well, these are all the considerations. These are all the things to consider.
Right.
Thank you.
So, any further discussion or comments?
No, ma'am. I think we know what we're going to do next meeting, and we just see it there. And I think next meeting, when it brings us to research, and we could decide what we want to do with it and have it as an action item, so we can make a motion to either put it to the full board or just to leave it alone.
Give me a couple of days, I'll clean up whatever I can from that report, and then I'll send it out, and that'll give everybody enough time to kind of look at it. Like I
Okay.
said, it's an endeavor we're gonna take on. I mean, it's not gonna be a year.
I mean,
Mrs. Lombard?
sorry, I know we're wrapping up, but so is there, in that research, because I pulled up Hanover's, when you mentioned it, in that research, does it talk about the benefits to the district too, as far as, I don't know, behavior activities, attendance, grades, it's all in there, right? All the, why we would do this is all in there?
I didn't get to break it down completely, but I think it really goes into the benefits, what they call of a healthy start time.
Okay, fine, that's good, thank you.
It's not just a breakdown of just one aspect. It's really called healthy school start time.
Okay, so at this point, entertain a motion for further consideration based off of the research that will be submitted by Mr. Testani for the next Teaching and Learning Committee meeting, 2 weeks.
So moved.
Second,
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
aye.
Aye. The motion passes. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
aye.
All right, good night, everyone.
Everybody.
I'm gonna send you a virtual donut.
Yeah, like Star Trek.
Yeah. Have a good night.
You too.
So what date are we looking at for